Judge Mara is the judge in Florida. So what happened in this case, as you've talked about in your introduction, is that way back in 2008, there was a plea agreement. There were state charges pending, there were federal charges pending. And the federal charges, which comprised a multi-page indictment, over 30 pages, they suddenly all went away. And that Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to plead to 2 state charges where he gets a 13-month sentence in a jail where he has all kinds of freedom. He goes into house arrest. He's able to travel to New York. He's able to travel to his Caribbean island. It was, talk about a slap on the wrist. Well, why does this become significant today? Well, there were multiple victims of sex trafficking, is the allegation, and all of that got swept under the rug. By whom? The U.S. attorney at the time, Mr. Acosta, is now our Secretary of Labor. Wow. So when you look at a possible indictment that would have amassed more than 30 pages involving sex trafficking, and it just suddenly mysteriously disappears and everything gets sealed, and somebody gets a little sweetheart deal, and none of the victims are told about this, none of them. And then there is something called the Victims' Rights Act. So the victims had a right to know. Now look, they can't dictate what the punishment is, but they certainly have a right to object and a right to be heard. And none of this happened. So all of this comes up again. Judge Mara, now in Florida, says back on February 22nd, all right, I'm not going to vitiate the plea agreement. I'm not going to say the plea agreement is dead, at least not yet. But what I am going to do is give you till March 8th, tomorrow. You, the government, better come up with an agreement with these victims about what you're going to do about their pain and about the fact that they weren't consulted, or else I'm going to have to do something, which certainly does leave open the possibility that the plea agreement could be taken away.
I don't know if I can ask this question, but what is the unspoken narrative about this case? We talk about a billionaire financier that gets a sweetheart deal.
Well, there's lots of unspoken narratives here. I find this, and I think I can say this without fear of my own contradiction. I find this whole episode involving Jeffrey Epstein and the criminal justice system the most scandalous that I have seen in my years of either trying cases or covering cases. And the fact that it's not really out there all the time in the media is just as important to me as to why we should cover it today.
Why do you say it's the most scandalous?
Because here you have a guy he was a billionaire. He was involved with very important people, including President Trump and Bill Clinton, so we can't put it on one side or the other. And it is said that he would get these underage girls, not only for himself, thinking of R. Kelly, who has become the news of the day, but he would get them for other people. So he was an alleged procurer, and there are multiple victims in this case. In the old days of when this case first started to bubble up, way back in 2008, the victims in this case were really treated like prostitutes instead of as underage victims. They were not believed. They were not really thought of as people who should be protected, which is, again, why people like Epstein and R. Kelly get away with this stuff. And why it becomes scandalous is, how does all of this stuff get sealed? How does none of this stuff become public? So that brings us to the other case, which is in New York. So yesterday there was a major argument before the Second Circuit Court of Appeals having to do with a related case that Jeffrey Epstein had a woman friend who was like his co-procurer. And there was a civil suit. And I don't want to get lost in the weeds of this civil suit. But the Miami Herald, who obviously is covering the case in Miami, they came up to New York, as well as a group of other news organizations, as well as lawyers, and including Alan Dershowitz. So we have big names here all over the place. Everybody wants this stuff public, except, of course, for
everyone involved?
Everyone involved.
Epstein and anyone else who haven't, Acosta perhaps?
Well, the idea that you have documents all redacted, when you've got people, you have people on the far right and people on the far left who are saying, open it up, open it all up. The Washington Post did an editorial to say, let's see it all. Because it's one thing to redact the names of underage victims. It's another thing to protect people in power. And what was the former U.S. Attorney, Mr. Acosta, now Secretary of Labor, what was he thinking? Was there really nothing to the sex trafficking case? Or was there really something to the sex trafficking case? I know Justice Brandeis once said sunlight is the best of disinfectants, but this case, as much as possible with the exception of the names of the underage victims, it has got to become public, and we should all be outraged that the system allowed this to occur.
Here's a Petty Pendergrass production. What's in Jeffrey Epstein's sex scandal documents? What's in the Jeffrey Epstein sex scandal documents? We may soon find out. It's from The Cut, from the New York Times. Long secret documents pertaining to billionaire hedge fund manager Jeffrey Epstein's child sex trafficking scandal may soon become public as a result of a new court ruling. The documents include years-old witness interviews, legal rulings, and other court records collected in 2015 when a woman named Virginia Jeffery sued Epstein's former partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, for defamation, claiming that Maxwell had publicly denied recruiting her into Epstein's sex ring when she was just 16. While the specifics of the documents are obviously not yet public, Jeffrey's lawsuit, it's likely they could contain a slew of damning information about allegations that have circulated as rumors for more than a decade. According to a bombshell investigation published by the Miami Herald last November, Epstein coerced at least 80 girls to have massages and perform sexual acts on him and others as part of an international sex ring which he ran out of his Palm Beach mansion and abroad. But we still don't yet know the extent of the allegations against Epstein. In 2008, he could have faced federal charges related to sex acts with minors, which could have landed him behind bars for life had he been found guilty. Instead, he got away with a lenient sentencing when Trump's current labor secretary, who was then a U.S. attorney, Alexander Acosta, offered him a controversial deal in which Epstein would plead guilty to 2 state charges of solicitation of prostitution and procurement of minors for prostitution. Epstein took the deal, which landed him a mere 13-month sentence in a laid-back county jail, and concealed witness testimony from the public. In 2017, the same thing nearly happened again. Jeffrey's defamation case was settled out of court, and those court orders and depositions were sealed as well. But the specifics of Epstein's sex ring may soon become public. On Monday, the panel for the U.S. Court of Appeals for Second Circuit told Maxwell, Epstein's former partner, that she has until March 19th to make a case as to why the 167 files related to the case should remain private. If Maxwell's argument isn't compelling, the summary judgment and the supporting documents will become public. While it's difficult to predict the repercussions of their release, the documents could shed light on specifics surrounding the alleged trafficking ring, including about the people who helped facilitate the alleged sexual abuse and actual logistics of running it. Because Epstein only pleaded guilty to the state charges in 2008, the exact size of the operation or who may have been involved are unknown to the public. There has been speculation for years that some of the rich and influential men who frequented his mansion, including Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and Prince Andrew, may have participated in the alleged abuse. Wow, Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. All have denied involvement. Earlier this month, Jeffrey's lawyer also accused celebrity lawyer Alan Dershowitz of being part of the operation, which he has vehemently denied. Epstein's attorney, Martin G. Weinberg, did not respond to the Herald's request for comments, but he and 3 of Epstein's former attorneys denied allegations that their client ran a child sex ring in a New York Times op-ed writing that the number of young women involved in the investigation has been vastly exaggerated. There is no international sex trafficking operation, and there was never evidence that Mr. Epstein hosted sex parties at his home. Following the U.S. Court of Appeals Monday ruling, the lawyer representing the Herald and the 32 supporting media outlets that have filed to open the documents counted the move as a celebration. We're grateful that the court has ruled the summary judgment papers are open and they are moving to expedite having them unsealed, said the attorney, Sanford Boyer. Wow. Can we say the other R. Kelly? No wonder they're putting out R. Kelly and Michael Jackson documentaries. They're trying to soften the blow for Mr. Epstein. And this has kind of been flying under the radar because you really haven't heard a lot about this, even though it's been in the paper. And these names are very salacious. I don't see any HBO documentary on this or any Lifetime documentary on this. And this is much more explosive. Will this come front and center? Will this blow R. Kelly's trial out of the headlines? Because we're not talking about a millionaire singer who can barely supposedly afford to pay his child support of $161,000. We're talking about a billionaire. And we're not talking about little black girls either. We're talking about little white girls. It's not that nobody cares about little black girls and what happens to them. When it happens to little white girls, they cover it up. My dear Officer Faulkner told me that pedophilia and underage sex was far more prevalent in the white community than it is the black community. The only difference is that the black community and black men are magnified, and what white people do or white men do is hidden. You look at the Catholic sex ring, well, one Catholic priest, that's been an open secret for hundreds of years, and nobody says anything. But Michael Jackson and R. Kelly are actually crucified in public. But black men are the usual suspects, and this is what happens. But you don't see white women climbing all over themselves to get to Jeffrey Epstein and unseal his documents. There's no hue and cry. There's an article here and there, but this isn't making TV. This isn't spread all over the front page. This is quietly in the background, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. But had this been a Bill Cosby or a Michael Jordan, this would have been an international scandal. Had this been a Chris Brown with one underage girl, it'd have been an international scandal. Chris Brown was accused of supposedly raping a prostitute in France, and instantly overnight this was splashed over the headlines. But this has been an ongoing thing that this dude served time for, and they seal the records. I'm not mad at him. Hey, it is what it is. But if you're gonna shine light on black men and talk about how bad black men are and what they do, you should shine an equal spotlight on the abuses that white, very rich and white powerful men do at the highest levels. But this is America, and we're black men. And who cares what happens to a black man? Even sometimes our own women. It is what it is. But one thing I can say about R. Kelly, black women do love him and they are taking up for him. So I guess there is a silver lining under this dark cloud. But with that, I'm going to jump off here. This is BGS out, and I will see you guys on. Peace.